of helping just nonprofits to be able to prove their impact, record and prove their impact, really just prove their worth, and all the things, all the programs that you guys specifically do. And I am honored again just to be able to assist you in that. Last week, we talked about this relationship triad between you as a nonprofit, the donor, and the population served, and being able just to see that each player in that relationship is equally important. And so we went through a needs assessment and talking about identification of needs. This week, we're going to talk about relationship problems. And the title of this week is actually going to be problem-driven direction. So this is going to be just an integral part of that theory of change. You're going to hear that at least for 2 more weeks. And so we started with the first part of this theory of change, looking at needs. And this week, we're going to talk about problem-driven direction, really looking at relationship problems. One thing that my wife and I actually do, in addition to this, in addition to what she does, which is website design, we also really like to help college students grow in developing into young leaders. And we do that specifically by assisting them in their mental and their spiritual health. And both of those things, it seems as if they drive change sort of in everything else when you focus on spiritual and mental health. But one thing I noticed, and both of us noticed actually, as we do it more and more, is that you get really good at conflict analysis and conflict resolution. And one of the things that one of my mentors was telling me in that realm, specifically in assisting college students, is that there's the issue that's stated, and then there's the issue that's real. There's the issue that's stated, and there's issue that's real. And what he was saying is that there's a surface level issue, which is the one that's stated, but then there's a heart issue. There's the real issue, which has to do with the heart. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about where we start, which is the issue that's stated when it comes to the problems that nonprofits, you guys are addressing. But then we're going to deconstruct our way to a place of figuring out what is the heart issue. And so this week is actually really helpful in practicality, implementation of this specifically. Think if you remember what we talked about a few weeks ago, maybe a couple of weeks ago, actually even last week, we touched on in each of those weeks, was this idea of problem construction, going from general to specific, specifically in that main problem. And so what we're going to actually emphasize today is both problem construction and problem deconstruction. So still going from general to specific. And to put it in an image, I'm going to share this with you guys. And so when you look at this image, I want you to think about really just the second part of what I said, the problem deconstruction. This image is really going to emphasize that of problem deconstruction. And so if you have to take a picture of it, whatever you have to do, but I will make sure to send it out by email again. But this is going to really highlight problem deconstruction. Awesome. And so in starting with problem deconstruction, you always start out with this main question. And the main question you should ask yourself and the team in which that you're speaking to is, what is the main problem in the community you are serving? And for the benefit of this week, I'm just going to focus on just one. So maybe asking, what is one main problem in the community that you are serving? Now, after you ask that, say you come up with, I was helping an additional client actually for the Office of Addiction Services, a shelter team for One Day at a Time in Philadelphia. And so this is actually a new program that I'm assisting in. But I asked them the same question that I just asked you guys. And they said one of them is opioid use. And so that is a very broad and in general just definition of the problem again. And you may remember this from the past week. And so we want to start out by constructing that. So what I did was I asked them, so what is the opioid use rate in Philadelphia? And unfortunately, they didn't know. And so that was okay. In that moment, we were able to look up a couple statistics and figure out that 80% of overdose deaths are due to or attributed to opioid use, specifically in Philadelphia. So that was one. You wanted to have a statistic to support whatever problem you're addressing. But two, I asked them, what community are you serving? Are you specifically in the entirety of Philadelphia? Are you in one region? Are you in one area? And they said they were focused on all of Philadelphia because all the people they're serving come from every place in Philadelphia. But the main place where opioid use is prevalent is specifically in Kensington. And so what we were able to find is that maybe we can look at different problems or address different problems in Philadelphia in its entirety, but we can also maybe focus on specifically the community in Kensington, because you'll be able to see change a little bit faster in Kensington rather than in Philadelphia. But then I also asked them, and I love this because, again, I'm giving you real world, real life examples here. But I also asked them, what age group do you focus on? Because there's a wide range of ages. And so maybe your program doesn't address all ages. And so thus you're not going to be able to see the change in every age group if your program was never intended to focus on every age. And so I asked them, what age group do you focus on? And they said 18 plus, but then they took that back a little bit. And then they said, actually between the range of 30 to 50. And so I went with both of those. And I have a more of a focus on 30 to 50, but at the same time, I'm open to keeping the 18 plus. And so what we were able to do was create and construct a very specific problem. We know the age group, we know the community in which that they're making a change and addressing, and we know the problem and we know the statistic. 4 things that really construct that problem. And that, my friends, is called the problem stated. So that for them was the problem stated. Opioid use, 80% overdose deaths were attributed to opioid use, specifically in Philadelphia for the age group between 30 to 50 or 18 plus. That was the problem for them. Now we're going to deconstruct that problem. So that was constructing the problem. Now we're going to deconstruct it. And this gets into the real problem. What are the hearts of those problems? And I think a great question to ask is, what are the causes of this main problem? Now, let me stop here and say this. You are going to have multiple main problems. And if you remember, I mentioned this idea of a fishbone diagram. If you don't remember, it's okay. Please go back to some of my other videos or email me and I'll be able to assist you with that. But each problem, each main problem is going to have its own fishbone diagram. Each problem, each main problem is going to have its own fishbone diagram. And so thus, each problem is going to have different causes. And so as we go through this, this is just one fishbone diagram, one main problem that we are specifically and practically going through right now. So in this problem, you want to ask, what are the causes of this main problem? And so for the organization I was working with, actually last week, one of the things that, or 2 things they brought up was easy accessibility to opioids in Philadelphia and poor mental health. Those were 2 of the causes of this main problem. And the beautiful thing about the fishbone diagram is that there is no wrong answer. I think a lot of times you get into a room and everyone's just trying to present the right answer. Everyone's trying to just simply be correct. And the beautiful thing about this is everyone is right, because this is simply theory. We have to test this out still. And so starting off, there are no wrong answers. Everything is on the board. Everything is right. Everything is worth saying, because these are things that you've experienced in the community that you're working that you think is really a cause of this main problem. And there's also no limit to the number of causes. Specifically in the organization I was helping for opioid use, they listed about 3 to 4 problems. But for the entirety of that organization, when it came to multiple main problems, it was about 5 main problems. And there was a ton of causes of those problems. I want to say probably like 12 to 15. And so again, there is no limit to the number of causes that you can come up with. And yes, that can get very overwhelming. It gets overwhelming when you keep it in your head. And the beautiful thing is, again, once you put it on the board, it comes from your head and gets onto something else. And so you're not trying to think through all those problems at the same time. You're actually seeing everything on a board, and you're able to see interconnectivity on a board rather than just keeping it all in your mind and thus being more overwhelmed. And so again, there is no limit to the number of causes. And what happens is these causes of these problems, they become your objectives for your organization. So what I mean by that is your organization has a mission statement. And then the objectives are those very things that you want to achieve and accomplish to get to that mission statement, or to fulfill that mission statement, or satisfy that mission statement. Well, rather than racking your brain and trying to figure out what objectives actually fall under this does it for you. Where you very clearly know, no, this should be an objective, this should be objective, and this also should be an objective, because it is based off our main problem that we're trying to tackle. And so these causes help you in identifying what your objectives are for your organization. And then following that, you also want to ask yourself the deeper question after that. So you know the main problem, you know the causes of those problems, and now you want to ask yourself, what are the causes of these problems? So going back to the graphic, because I know that can be somewhat confusing, you've asked yourself what the main problem is. You've asked yourself what the cause of that problem is. Now you want to ask yourself, what is the cause of that problem? What is the cause of, or what is the sub-cause of the problem that is the cause of the problem? Yes, it gets confusing as you mentioned it, and that's why I provided a graphic for it. And so I guess the best way to ask that is, again, what are the causes of these problems, to make it just simplify it a little bit. But if you look at the graphic, it is able to explain it a little bit better. And so in that deeper question of what are the causes of these problems, well, these become your indicators. These become your measurements. These sub-causes become your indicators and become your measurements. And what that means is how do you know you're fulfilling your objective? Well, you look at these measurements. How do you know you're fulfilling the thing that you said you were going to fulfill? Well, you look at these indicators. And so what happens is, I guess specifically for, not I guess, but specifically for the organization that we're helping, one of their causes was easy accessibility to opioids. One of their sub-causes was human contacts. And what they meant by that is that I have a lot of friends that really know where to get opioids. And another sub-cause was the inexpensiveness of opioids. That it's easy for people to purchase them because it's not a lot of money to purchase them in Philadelphia. These were the sub-causes. And so these become their measurements. And so what you see is that as they tackle these sub-causes of, let's say, human contacts, and so maybe less, you're able to, as a program, or they're able to, as a program, help to impact their friends, so they have less and less friends that know where to get opioids, or they are using opioids. And so they report that less and less friends are using that, but also maybe the price of opioids is increasing so that less and less people can actually purchase them, not only on the regular market, but on the black market. And so what that does is, well, that should show and should reflect in the accessibility of opioids, the cause of that main problem. And so what you're going to see is a trend. What you'll see is this: solving the sub-cause should lead to solving the cause, which should lead to providing a solution for the main problem. Let me say it again. Solving the sub-cause should lead to solving the cause, which should lead to providing a solution for the main problem. That is the theory of change. When you're able to take me from the sub-cause of a problem to the main problem and take me through that entire process of how you got there, that is what you call a theory of change. And that is what you are testing. And this is worth mentioning again. You're going to have multiple hearts to one problem. You're going to have multiple hearts to one problem, and that's okay. I think a lot of times we rack our brains about trying to have, what is the main heart? What is the one heart win? In fact, there is so much interconnectivity that there are multiple hearts to it. And it's just simply too hard. It's really impossible to just identify one heart. And I think in the same way, in the same manner for this provides a structure where you're able to identify all hearts, but then you're also able to identify where you can actually bring about and inflict change based off your program and based off your organization. A great way to think about that is, what are your access points? Access points are, where can you start? And so for the organization I was assisting, we were able to figure out that they had the capacity to start with accessibility to resources, which was, or opioids, which was one of their cause of the main problem, and poor mental health. And that's what we are starting to measure as of right now. And that's where they begin. And I think in explaining this, one thing that I have learned is that it is so helpful, especially for the first time, to have someone walk you through doing this. I know for me, I tried to do this by myself and completely failed. And you guys aren't me, so thank you so much that you're not. But it took my mentor a while back, I want to say about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years, to walk me through how to implement this. And the reason I say that is because it's one thing to have the information and someone to talk to you, but it's another thing to have someone walk through it with you. And so for me, and that's what I advise organizations with, is that it's so important, especially important on the first time, to have someone walk you through this rather than you trying to do it on your own. Because there's so many things that just come up that we just don't know how to address yet because we haven't been in that setting quite yet. But to end with this is how we're going to start. This is how you know as an organization where to start, is by first looking at this problem in a different direction, by first going through and looking at what is the main problem, what is the cause of that main problem, and what is the cause of that problem. And once you identify that, well, then we can figure out how and where to start, more so, where to start specifically. Or the question of how do you know where to start? Well, that is what we're going to get into even more so next time, with talking about solution-driven direction. And so this one is simply focused on the problem, and the heart of that problem, and the heart of that problem. And that is so important in figuring out where to start. But as I'm learning more and more, that is just one side of the story. That is just going to be an incomplete picture if we stop drawing right there. And so what we need to do is be both problem-driven and solution-driven. And so that's why we're going to talk about next time solution-driven direction or approach, because that completes the picture on where to start and where to begin and how to continue to move forward as you are measuring and proving your impacts. Awesome, guys. So that is the end of this week. And if you guys have any questions, I am open to them at this time.
You know, I have one.
Yes.
So is this something that you would do like with your board, or would it be something you present like the results to your board? So you know what I mean? Like, is it a brainstorming type thing?
Yeah. So I actually recommend both, depending. So what I did with the organization now that I'm working for, I did it with the entire board first.
Wow.
Because they are able to provide different perspectives on what's the main problem and what are the causes of those problems, what are the causes of those problems. But when it comes to solutions, I don't go to the entire board because they don't have the specific expertise for each solution to those problems.
Right.
So when it comes to solutions, I go to each team that focuses on that problem.
Okay.
And so I'll be able to identify this team can provide a solution for this problem, this team for this problem, and then we'll have separate meetings. And that's
Gotcha.
the solution-driven direction.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
No problem. Awesome. Well, if that is it, I will conclude this week, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week. And I will make sure to email this out with the graphic following me pressing end meeting on the Zoom call.
Thanks,
So I will see you guys later.
Bye-bye.
No problem. Bye.